Did you know that every single image of space, like this one, is photoshopped? But that's not actually a bad thing. I'm Logan Nicholson, and this is Australian Astronomy. So I'd like to start off by saying, no, I'm not a flat earther, and I don't wear a tinfoil hat. I'm not implying that these images are actually fake. I'm just saying that they're actually made using Photoshop. So you might see someone mention online, when they post a picture of space, that they processed it in Photoshop. And then the next comment you'll probably find is, "Oh my god, I can't believe you faked this picture. How dare you?" So all pictures of space do indeed go through Photoshop or a similar program. So while the typical description of Photoshop is probably something more like adding or removing parts of an image, astrophotographers use Photoshop more as a tool to modify the base data of the image. There is nothing being added or removed here. There is simply just the modification of the data. The raw data from the camera is simply just being manipulated, as straight from the camera, it's very bland. It shows just about nothing at all in the image. So astrophotographers have to use programs like Photoshop to reveal more of what's actually in the data. This is what you're looking at when you see raw data from your camera after astrophotography. It's black with a few tiny pinpricks of stars. Astrophotographers typically use programs like Photoshop for a very specific set of purposes. These are to make the image look much nicer than they typically would, because straight from the camera they actually come out very noisy. So noise is like sort of grain that you might see in the image. This is because you're taking photos of such a dim target that you need a long exposure time, and over time noise can build up. The first thing astrophotographers usually do is stack images. This can be done with a variety of programs, not actually Photoshop. What this does is stack a bunch of images on top of each other. You typically take 30, 60 images for one picture, and then you stack them on top of each other. What this does is average out any sort of noise in the pictures, and you get much more strong signal instead of noise. From there, your stacked image is then moved into your processing software. And this begins what astrophotographers call processing, which is actually one of the most important steps in creating a photo of space. Only half the work is done when you actually go out and take photos at night. From there, you have to manipulate the data to create an image. Each astrophotographer has their own processing workflow, but for me, there are 4 main steps in terms of processing. Those being stretching, noise reduction, color calibration, and cosmetic changes. But you said earlier that astrophotographers don't add and remove things from their image, so why can there be cosmetic things? Well, typically in astrophotography, these changes are very minor. They don't actually affect the raw data in the image. They just might change stars a tiny bit. So most people don't mind these changes. But now let's go to some examples of the 4 steps of astrophotography processing. Alright, so I'm in my processing software of choice called PixInsight, which I'll discuss later. But basically, this is what you're looking at when you see raw data from your camera after astrophotography. It's black with a few tiny pinpricks of stars. First, astrophotographers would probably do something called a stretch. So what you're doing here is sort of stretching out the data in your image to show what you actually captured. So typically this is done with something called a histogram transformation. The histogram transformation is a histogram of basically all of the data values in the image plotted on a graph. And from here, you can drag the sliders to sort of stretch different areas of the histogram. So let's see what happens if we right now just bring the histogram up a little bit. Gets a lot brighter if we bring that mid-tone section. So that's just increasing in general the data values of the image. But then the second step of stretching is to bring down the black point. So you can see that there's this whole sort of region where we don't actually see any data, as there's no spike in data here. So that means this is empty space, and it's just pushing up the darkest point of the image to this sort of ugly grey looking colour. What we want to do from there is take the black clipping, pull it down, and then bring our mid-tone up again, and that just reveals the beautiful hidden portion of the image that we literally went from this black and white image, this is what the raw image looks like, to this. That is the power of stretching in astrophotography. Okay, so another thing that astrophotographers will do to their images is reduce the noise. So even stacked images contain a fair amount of noise after the stacking, which is supposed to get rid of the noise, you might say. But it doesn't get rid of all of the noise. There's still some noise left over. And once you stretch the image, that can actually become a lot more prevalent. So as you can see, we're looking at this noise here, which is this sort of grainy, colourful regions that just don't look too nice. And you wouldn't want to be looking at this in the final photo. So there are specific tools in PixInsight that will reduce the noise for you. So this is MMT, Multiscale Median Transform. And we'll just apply that now. So see this colourful grainy noise? So we'll hit apply. And would you look at that? The sort of colourful variation, most of it anyway, the bulk of the colour variation is gone. Back, forth, back, forth. And as you can see, a lot of that sort of colour variation, it just sort of gets eliminated by the noise reduction process. Then we'll say, target the luminance, we'll hit apply. So that's after the luminance. And that also sort of kills most of the variations, as you can see. Back, forth, back, forth. So that basically helps you have a lot more cleaner looking image afterwards. So typically the most fun part about processing an astro image is that you get to do sort of cosmetic changes afterwards, once you've done all the noise reduction and stuff like that. So this is our stretched image after noise reduction, and we can see it's sort of a bit bland looking. Some people might prefer this look, it's more of a natural look, but I myself would like to say, if we go into curves, we can adjust sort of the image and what it looks like. So this is a curve transformation tool, and we're adjusting the histogram, but just in a different way this time. You can bring it down, make the image dimmer, bring it up, make it brighter, so on and so forth. So let's, for example, bring the bright parts brighter, or the dim parts brighter. And then another cosmetic change that we might want to make is saturation. So this should really make the star colors and the reds pop in this image. There you go. But the problem I have with cosmetic changes is that a lot of people, in my opinion, can overdo it a lot. So you might see an image like this, and then someone decides, oh, that looks good. So it's definitely a lot of personal preference, and this is the part where you can sort of choose how you want your image to actually come out looking. So some people might prefer more saturation, like myself, but others might prefer a more natural look, like this. So I hope that was an interesting and educational look into the basics of astrophotography processing, so what it's for and how it's actually done in a very simple manner. So hopefully after watching this video you might be interested to take astrophotos yourself. And I have plenty of other videos on my channel that might show you how it's done, just simply without much explanation. But maybe that's something in the future I could work on. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm Logan Nicholson, and this was Australian Astronomy.